Jen and Bill were such awesome parents. They located to Cheshire and decided to raise their girls there, and I think had like a beautiful life there.
My aunt was Jennifer Pettit, and my cousins were Haley and Michaela. I think my earliest memory is being at their house in Connecticut. Michaela was just like my very best friend. Haley would make sure we were all like kept in line. It couldn't be more like siblings when we were all together.
On July 22nd, 2007, I was sitting here and my sister had given me a call. She was at the beach. When I picked up the phone, I said, "So, how are you?" And she said, "I'm great. There's not a cloud in the sky. It is the most beautiful blue sky. It is just the most perfect day."
There's emergency. I'm the banking center manager at Bank of America. We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says her husband and children are being held at their house. Her name, Jennifer Pettit.
We clearly have a fire fatality. I know that there's bodies inside, but how many deaths are we looking at?
The activities at the home took the police by surprise.
None of those officers had ever encountered a scene like they encountered inside that house. It was pretty clear right from the beginning that this was going to be a terrible story.
For this to occur to this family is the worst thing most people could ever imagine.
It was outrage that these guys could do something this horrendous to wipe out an innocent family.
They were wonderful human beings, and we lost a lot in losing these three women.
These women did everything that they were told to do, so it was hard.
This was an all-American family living in a beautiful suburban town, and then horror came to their house.
I miss all of the future that we had, like the future memories, the future fun events. My mom should have gotten to be with my aunt. And I feel so sad that she doesn't get to have that.
I don't know how anyone can do this. Like, you're not human to me if you do things like this. This one's when the girls came to visit us and Jen and Uncle Billy, and we had, I believe it was an anniversary dinner party for our parents. And the four of you are standing on the stairwell here. And then you're up in the bonus room on this brightly colored floral couch we had.
You probably picked out our outfits. Would you like chat with her about like, I'm gonna dress her in this and you're gonna dress her in that? And like, they coordinate well. Did you guys pre-plan things like that?
I think we always just made sure we thought you had cute clothes on. This is the one where they're out catching fireflies and we're standing on the porch.
My like first clear memory is like playing with fireflies and catching them with all of them in my grandparents' front yard in Pennsylvania. And it was really sweet.
As a Methodist minister's family, you tend to move around a lot. I feel like Jen and I were a lot closer because we always knew we'd be there for each other. As an older sibling, she was constantly giving me advice. And she had a lot of finesse about how to dress, how to wear her hair, what looked pretty. I think Jen was very caring about other people and their feelings. I feel like that's kind of what guided her into being interested in becoming a nurse. She was working at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. And she said, I'm gonna go out with this guy. He's in med school here. His name is Bill. He's taking me to a place downtown called Tramps. And I was like, wait, I gotta get this. Like, you're going out with a guy named Bill and he's taking to like a nightclub named Tramps. I was like, I don't know, Jen, this guy just doesn't sound good to me. Like, he just might be a loser. She went out with him and she had a really good time. And it was just a success story after that. When they got pregnant with Haley, I couldn't wait for it because I'd never had a child. When I first met Haley, I could see how Jen and Bill just loved her so much. I just loved rocking her when she was a newborn, and I think I loved her like she was my own. After Jennifer had Haley, 2 years later, I was pregnant with Evan, and then 2 years after, I had my daughter Lydia. 2 years later, Jen had Michaela. They started to just call her KK, or KK Rosebud.
Hi! Show me what you have there. Can you show me in the morning before you go how you ride the zip line? So nicely?
KK was super soft-spoken, but I think she went out of her way to look out for other people. She would be the person that would look around and be like, oh, you're by yourself. I'm going to make sure that you're included. She was just like my little best friend. There wasn't anything Haley wasn't good at. She was like classic older child. I never got to have an older sister, and I never got to have a younger sister, and that's what it felt like when we were all together.
Hey! Hi! I have to get you on video before you go home. Lydia, did you have fun with your cousins? You liked sleeping with that one? You girls had a big slumber party in here, huh? Yep.
The last time that I saw Haley, Michaela, and Auntie Jen, all of us went to our boat in Carolina Beach. And we just spent every day, like sun up to sundown at the beach. And it's the same beach that my mom grew up going to with Auntie Jen. Haley would make sure we were all kept in line, and like everyone had sunscreen on and we were all ready to go and play. And my brother would always want to go off and do some sporty thing. Her and Evan could just like hang. She could like rough and tough with any of the boys. I'm sure she could kick his butt like up and down in every sport. So I feel like he had a best friend there too.
I was sitting here and my sister had given me a call. She said, it was so fun when Haley and Michaela and I all came down and visited your boat. Like, we really want to come back and bring Billy.
I'd been texting back and forth with Michaela, excited about it, and calling her about it. We kept kind of going between all of us. And the more excited I could get Michaela, the more she would then go to her mom and be like, we're so excited. We're going to make sure this happens. I remember hanging up and being like, okay, talk tomorrow. I love you. Like, just real fast. Like, things weren't done. Like, our conversations weren't over. But that was it. Like, yeah.
In 2007, Cheshire was the kind of town where people would feel comfortable if they didn't lock their doors.
Cheshire is one of those places that felt like it was picture perfect. Like you just couldn't imagine that you weren't safe.
Was there crime there? Yes. But it was typically very low-level type things. I cannot recall in my 39 years of being a prosecutor, something like this never happens there. It just doesn't.
Emergency. I'm the banking center manager at Bank of America. We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says her husband and children are being held at their house. Her name, Jennifer Pettit.
The 911 call was from the bank manager, and I think the police didn't really understand what it was. It took them 5 minutes to respond to the bank, and in that time frame, Jennifer left the bank, got in the car, and they drove back to the house.
The police arrived shortly after receiving the call from the bank teller. They surrounded the house in different locations. Approximately 5 to 10 minutes later, they observed some flames coming from the house.
I got a call from one of my coworkers, and she said, "Just wanted you to know we have a report of a house fire in Cheshire. It sounds pretty bad." By the time I got there, I knew very clearly this was far more than just a house fire.
At the time, I was a reporter at the Hartford Courant, and I got a phone call from a state police source that this was going to be a bad case. Over the scanner, you could hear that they were trying to get in because they knew there were people in there.
It was difficult for anybody to know where to turn first.
We had people running down there, photographers and reporters running down to the scene. So it was a pretty hectic situation.
I'm watching them desperately trying to get in the doors, and they can't. That tells me there is somebody still inside. They would not be so frantic to get in if they were not trying to save a life. Then we start hearing smatterings of, they've got people they're putting in handcuffs.
The police had arrested 2 people, leaving the scene at a high rate of speed.
There was a roadblock. They tried to smash through the roadblock and didn't succeed, and they were arrested at gunpoint while the fire was burning.
As reporters, we're all just beginning to get bits and pieces of information. Things changed very fast, not just for us, but for all of the first responders. Neighbors are telling me they think at least some of the family members were still in the house. But then another neighbor said to me that an ambulance was in the area of the back of the Pettit house, and that Dr. Pettit came out of the basement, and they're not sure what that was all about.
Emergency. Are you police? Yes. I got Bill Pettit here, who's hurt, my neighbor.
The neighbor at first didn't recognize him. He was screaming for help. He had multiple head injuries that were bleeding. His hands were bleeding, his wrists were bleeding. When they got him to the hospital, they determined he had lost almost 7 pints of blood.
From the information that we were given, Dr. Pettit had fallen asleep in the sunroom watching TV.
In the middle of the night, he woke up, found himself being struck by a hard object in the head numerous times. He began bleeding profusely. It was in his eyes. He couldn't see, but he could make out there were 2 people. He had heard a voice saying, "If he moves, shoot him, put a couple of bullets in him." He was led downstairs into the basement. His hands and ankles were bound with plastic zip ties. He was tied up to a support pole.
During the 6 hours or so that they were in the house, police believe he was unconscious because of the beating.
I was only 13 when everything happened. My mom was trying to convince me to do some kind of math worksheet or something. And I remember trying to distract her by being like, well, why don't we call Auntie Jen? And then our home phone rang, and it was my uncle's sister. I remember handing my mom the phone. And before she picked up the phone, she said something happened to the girls.
Because I'm thinking in my mind, like, why would you be calling me? Like, you never call me. You would only call me if they can't. Something must be wrong. And I said, are they dead? And she said, how did you know? She said, well, there were these 2 men, and they came into their home in the night. They broke in somehow through the basement. tied the girls to their beds and they beat Billy really badly. And I was like, you mean he's still alive? And she said, well, for now. I remember going out on my deck and just thinking, oh my goodness, like I have to call my parents and I have to tell them that not just their daughter, whom they love dearly, is dead, but their 2 grandchildren are also gone. And I just screamed, this guttural scream.
I sat next to her as she told my grandparents what had happened to their daughter and their grandkids. That's tough. I remember when we got to Connecticut, we were staying with my uncle's sister. It just felt like this terrible movie that we were in.
I had fears of being in public. I thought if 2 men could do this, how do we know we're not in the company of people that can do other horrible things to us? We went on to see Billy in the hospital because it was really all we wanted to do was just to see him.
I remember going to the hospital and seeing my uncle for the first time and just being like, I cannot believe that he's alive. Touching and holding my hand, I can't believe you look like that and you're responding and you're alive. That was a miracle in itself.
Seeing him there laying in that bed and hearing him saying, I'm so sorry, it's me and not her laying here. I know you would rather wish it would be her and not me. And I was like, no, Billy, don't think like that. We wish it could have been all of you, but at least you're here.
It was clear that he was having a very, very difficult time dealing with what happened, and that's understandable. I mean, he's lost everything.
They said he'd lost so many pints of blood that he really shouldn't have lived.
The 2 people arrested were Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komarzewski. Both of them had extensive criminal records.
Hayes had a raft of petty larcenies and burglaries. The last one that had put him in prison was for breaking into a home through a window. Joshua Komarzewski was 26 at the time.
He was known to the Cheshire Police Department as someone who was a problem.
He prided himself on breaking into people's houses at night and literally watching them sleep.
It gave him a feeling of superiority over others, and he liked that feeling of power. He had been sentenced to a significant sentence in jail.
Komarzewski and Hayes had been released early from prison, so technically both of them still should have been in jail when this occurred.
Once released, they both met up at a halfway house and decided that they were going to hang out together and commit crime.
These guys had broken in and brutally murdered this family. It could have been any house in any suburb in Connecticut where this happened, and people were freaked out.
Komarzewski and Stephen Hayes did confess to certain aspects of the crime. They both fully admitted, hey, look, I'm a burglar. I broke into the house. We were planning to steal money. Both of their stories was, well, it was the other guy who started the fire. He's the one who killed these people, and it was never supposed to get that far.
They broke into the house at 3 a.m., hit Dr. Pettit with a bat, tied him up in the basement, tied up all the girls in their bedrooms.
The perpetrators found a bank statement, and it was at that point they directed Mrs. Pettit that she was to go to the bank and withdraw the $15,000.
Jennifer Pettit went to the bank with Stephen Hayes, and she managed to pass a note to the teller saying, "My family is being held hostage, call the police."
Stephen told Mrs. Pettit that if she did anything to alert a teller, that they would kill her children and her husband. So even with that very credible threat being laid, she still took the risk to try to save her family.
I think she looked distraught. I know she probably had the fear of what was happening to the girls back at the house on her mind. I don't know if she knew what was going on with Billy because he was kind of absent and in the basement.
Dr. Pettit also provided us with some new information concerning the event.
Right at the time when Jennifer and Stephen Hayes returned from the bank,
Dr. Pettit heard like a thud. As he described it, it sounded like a body or something hitting the floor above him. Dr. Pettit really didn't know what was going on upstairs. He didn't know. He also heard a voice saying, "Don't worry, it'll be over in a few minutes."
Jennifer was killed in the living room right above where he was tied up. So that's part of what he heard.
It was at that point when he realized he needed to do something, and he had to get out of there.
As a medical doctor, he knew the extreme amount of blood he lost, that his blood pressure was actually lowered as a result. He was trying to take steps, such as standing up, just to raise his blood pressure enough that he had a hope of getting help for his wife and children.
He was able to break free, and he ran out the back bulkhead that the two guys had come in, which was still open.
He could barely stand up or walk. He literally log rolled to a neighbor's house.
Back upstairs, they started spreading the gasoline around the living room, on the stairs, into bedrooms, and then lit the fire as they were running out of the house.
They were running at the same time that Jennifer had just been murdered, and Bill is out the back door, and it's all happening at once. But the girls were still alive.
To think that these young girls were restrained and having gasoline poured in their bedrooms, knowing that eventually someone's going to light a fire. I can't imagine what that was like.
So these are Wet and Wild, the four of you laying on a towel.
That's so cute.
And this one, you all went to get cotton candy, so you're stuffing your mouths with cotton candy.
Look at her face.
She's so happy. Michaela was a lot of fun. She always had this cute little smirky grin that I could relate to.
What do we have in here? 2 sleeping cousins.
Haley was so strong, so smart, all of the perfect first child things. Haley was just brilliant and was just insane at athletics.
She was definitely on a path to something greater, and to think that that was all cut short was just so sad. I wanted to go to their home because I wanted to see that it was all real and it did all happen. The outside didn't portray really what happened inside the home.
Going into that house is not something I'll ever forget. Upon going into the front door, you were confronted with just a black, charred mess. and the smell of smoke and burnt material. It's all you could smell. The most disturbing of all, though, was going up those stairs, because we knew when we went in there that 2 young girls had died on that second floor. And that was very hard to deal with. It was quite evident that there had been accelerants poured. You could see the pour patterns on the floor.
The police literally tracked the gasoline that was left up the stairwell into the rooms of the 2 girls. This leaves a very different mark than if there was just a regular fire occurring, so they could actually see the exact pathway the fire took.
There were ties still attached to the beds.
Haley was able to untie herself, and like she got out of her like restraints, and instead of going to leave, she went to go try to untie Michaela.
It was clear that she was running to her sister's room when she was overcome by the fire and the smoke, and her body was found at the top of the stairs, not too far from the entrance to Michaela's room. Michaela never was able to get free.
I'm sure Haley was trying to figure out a way to get Michaela out of her bindings, and she would never have left that home without her little sister.
Haley was just 17 years old and Michaela was only 11. These 2 offenders had no intention of leaving these victims alive.
Going into the house, as difficult as it was a necessary thing. The 2 people arrested had given versions of what happened, and it was necessary to go into the house to see whether or not the evidence that was found in the house matched up with what they were telling police.
Police wanted there to be no ambiguity on this. They wanted as much physical and forensic evidence to make sure they were both found guilty in court.
There are a number of feelings that go through your head when you go to a crime scene such as this. Anger, frustration that it couldn't have been stopped, and sadness of the tragedy that the community had lost 3 vibrant young women. Yeah, I had a family. Yeah, it was hard. Hard. When you have a young daughter who's the same age as the younger victim here, it kind of hits home.
When the memorial service happened, Bill had been in the hospital still. And so we didn't know if doctors were going to release him to even come.
I remember seeing Billy before he came to the church. We observed a doctor removing the stitches from his head. I just remember thinking, he's so black and blue.
Watching my uncle leave the hospital and sitting behind him and like still seeing all like the stitches and like the open wounds in his head. And like, it's unreal to picture that he was like, okay, like I have to be there for my family now.
I remember when I saw Billy get up to speak, just thinking, oh my gosh, like he's really getting up. He's going to do this. I couldn't believe it.
There was a collective gasp in the room.
He talks about Michaela as like the kid that would go out of her way to like take care of the FLKs. And he like explained it as like funny looking kid. KK was just showing those like little things that she was going to be a great human.
He was immensely proud of his daughters, and I think he relished every moment with them.
I remembered him talking about Haley and just like how strong and athletic she was and how close she was to her dad was really special. I wanted someone to love me the way that he like loved my aunt. He was talking about her like she was glowing.
It was very clear that his family was the center of his world, that Jennifer was his best friend. His general message was, when you leave here, remember who they were and let that guide you to do things in their memory that exhibits their kindness and their compassion and their excitement for life. You know, it was a message of, this was a horrible thing, but this cannot be how we remember them. We have to remember who they really were.
If we can keep doing the good that they would have, then that's the best that we can do.
Because this was a death penalty case, it took several years for them to actually go to trial. The trials were held in New Haven Superior Court.
Each of them were blaming the other for basically escalating the event which led to the murders. And so they had to be tried separately.
Hayes went to trial on September 13th, 2010.
Stephen Hayes was tried on 17 counts. Those involved assault charges, kidnapping, home invasion, and felony murder, as well as arson murder.
Komisarjevsky went on trial about a year later in September of 2011.
Joshua Komisarjevsky was tried for the same crimes as Stephen Hayes.
It was clear that the case really started the night before when Joshua Komisarjevsky happened to go to the Stop and Shop at the same time as Michaela and Jennifer to get supplies to make some pasta dinner.
Komisarjevsky saw Michaela in the grocery store and immediately took a liking to her.
He had a weird infatuation with young girls. He followed them home and watched the house for a bit, and then called Hayes and told him to come down to Cheshire, that they were going to make a big score.
He sexually assaulted Michaela after hours of having her be tied up. This, I think, was the primary goal. The robbery was actually just an additional thing that they were able to get out of this horrific crime.
The sexual assault on Michaela took place while he had sent Hayes and Mrs. Pettit to the bank. When Stephen Hayes got back from the bank with Mrs. Pettit, Komisarjevsky kept pressuring him. I assaulted the girl, now you have to assault the mother. Stephen Hayes did strangle her to death after sexually assaulting her. They were intent on getting rid of whatever evidence could connect them to those sexual assaults, and that was a big reason for the fire, to cover up their culpability. There was accelerant on both of the defendants, on their footwear, on their pants, and so forth. As far as we were concerned, they were both entered up to their eyeballs.
I think some people never heard autopsy results before, especially involving a crime. It's always hard.
Haley and Michaela Pettit both had died from smoke inhalation. They had also suffered burns from the fire, having direct contact with the flames.
I think one thing that did seem to really strike people was that Haley had managed to get free and make it to the top of the stairs before she collapsed. She'd fought so hard to save Michaela and just didn't quite make it.
There was extensive accelerants that were poured on that stairway. That clearly showed the intention of the perpetrators was to make sure that no one was going to be able to escape down the stairway. Jennifer's body had been extensively burned, which appears to be an effort to destroy evidence of a sexual assault. Despite the fact that it was said numerous times by these defendants that there was no intent to do that, they did it. It's kind of an explanation that doesn't really make much sense. There were 12 jurors in total. They all had to agree unanimously that the defendant was guilty. They found Stephen Hayes guilty of 16 charges. He was found not guilty of the arson.
And that's because the jury was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he's the one that set the match, that lit the fire, that started the arson.
But they felt that the death penalty was the appropriate penalty.
Joshua was convicted on all 17 counts and sentenced to death.
I was satisfied with the verdicts. I thought justice was done.
Not long after Joshua was convicted, Connecticut did decide to eliminate the death penalty. And so their cases were commuted into a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which means they will die in jail.
3 young women are gone, and it's a loss. It's a big loss to the community. It was a big loss to the family. It's just unfortunate that they never had the opportunity to do the good things that they were destined to do. And that's tragic.
When we finally did get the 911 records and the dispatch, it showed that police were outside the house for roughly 26 minutes.
How that could have changed the trajectory of this horrific case, I'm sure that just weighs on the rest of the family members. Did it have to happen like this?
There were no blinds and no curtains on my sister's windows. How could they not have seen what was going on there? You could have just looked in and seen that my sister was like already laying there. But at least you could have saved the girls.
They were outside their house and they should have done something. I can't harp on that because it destroys me, but that stuff matters.
When people are taken hostage and there's an intruder in a home, the police are always concerned, is this person armed? Will they just shoot and kill the hostages immediately? A lot of illogical thinking happens, and that's what police are afraid of. And they take extra precautions to make sure that they're protecting the lives of these victims so these terrible outcomes don't occur. However, there are rules that allow police to deviate from that because they think there is imminent danger or time is of the essence. There's a crime ongoing, and if they don't do it immediately, then in fact, lives or evidence could be lost. But in this small town where they hardly ever experienced this, they probably weren't that well versed in these types of rules.
The fire was lit right before the defendants fled the scene. So certainly had the police gone in there before the fire was lit, good chance the girls would have been saved. But it's very difficult when you're presented with a situation and you simply don't have all the facts to make a decision that could end up costing people's lives. The police afterwards felt terrible. They might have been saved, the Pettit women. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way.
Billy, my brother-in-law, was like, what would you do with that property if you were me? I'm like, that house just needs to be taken down. Nobody wants to try to refurbish a house where that awful thing happened.
He turned it into a memorial garden for them, and people in the community helped tend it, and it is beautiful.
After the verdicts, I felt we should go. Yeah. And it was kind of like to get some closure for myself. It's a peaceful place. I think it's a place that people go to remember the family that lived there, to remember the Pettit girls and Mrs. Pettit, and kind of reflect on their lives. They were were extraordinary people. And so they'll always be in my thoughts.
Cheshire carries this. It was a tremendously traumatic event. They'd never had anything like this and haven't had anything like it since then.
I still do feel like I'm lucky that I have such special people to grieve. And I think that all comes from like watching my mom handle it, because she lost everybody. Like it felt like she was like left behind kind of, and she met it with grace.
At my daughter's wedding, she was given a very small charm that I keep on the mirror in my car. And it had like a picture of the three girls in the middle of it. It was wrapped with a ribbon at the bottom of my daughter's bouquet. So we felt like walking down the aisle, the girls were right there with her.
Who's getting ready to go home? We've had a great time. Hayes, what'd you get? Back seat book? Go Santi Chan, back for Connecticut. Bye! Bye, Mommy! Bye-bye!
This past summer, we finally like buried my aunt's ashes. Like it took this long because my grandparents' wish was like them to all be buried together. And I like got to hold my husband's hand through all of that and be like, he got to see, I guess, that side of everything. And that was my like full circle moment where like I got to show Sullivan where I grew up and made all these memories with my cousins. And we got to catch the fireflies and like do all of the things.
The positive things that I think of when I see my daughter with her son are things like what a great mother my sister was to her daughters, and what a good family they had, and how they worked very hard at trying to educate their daughters to make them be the best people they could be.
It's been so long since I've gotten to like have them and be around them and like listen to them laugh. I love that I always get called like a mini Jennifer. I thought she was like this perfect, beautiful human. I just wanted to be her. Like I love that we match and look similar, but like I would have loved the comparison now. Like I would have loved to get to stand next to her and take those pictures.
Mình sẽ viết tiếp theo hướng hư cấu hoàn toàn, phong cách chu cam điện ảnh. Không dựa trên hay ám chỉ một vụ án có thật cụ thể ở Pennsylvania năm 1990. Title: Pennsylvania 1990 Cold Case Solved. Shocking DNA hit ends decades of mystery. Fictional true crime screenplay. The first scream never made the newspapers. It disappeared into the cold November wind, carried across empty cornfields and swallowed by a town that believed nothing truly terrible could happen there. By sunrise, the silence itself had become evidence. Front doors remained unlocked. Coffee steamed on kitchen tables. Church bells rang on schedule. And somewhere beyond the tree line, hidden beneath layers of frost and fallen leaves, a secret began a journey that would survive 3 decades, outlive marriages, bury witnesses, and wait patiently for a single strand of DNA to speak. People in Millfield, Pennsylvania, still remember the winter of 1990 as the season when certainty died. Back then, everyone knew everyone. Children crossed neighborhoods without fear. Store owners recognized customers by the sound of their footsteps. Friday night football mattered more than politics. Crime belonged to television screens in distant cities. The idea of a brutal mystery unfolding in their own community felt impossible, almost offensive. Then 24-year-old Emily Harper vanished. No warning, no dramatic goodbye, No packed suitcase waiting beside the door. Just absence. The kind of absence that enters a room and changes its temperature. Emily lived alone in a small white house on Cedar Street. She worked evenings at the public library and spent weekends helping her father repair old radios in the garage behind his farm. Friend described her as disciplined, careful, predictable. She called her mother every Sunday. She hated surprises. She never missed work. On November 14th, she failed to appear for her morning shift. By noon, concern turned into alarm. By evening, fear had a name. Police arrived at her home, expecting a routine welfare check. What they found made experienced officers pause in complete silence. The front door stood partially open. Lights remained on. A kettle sat cold on the stove. Her purse rested neatly beside the kitchen table. Her car remained in the driveway. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared broken. And yet every instinct inside that house screamed that something had gone terribly wrong. Investigators noticed a single overturned chair. One. No shattered windows. No signs of forced entry. No blood covering the walls like scenes from movies. Just one chair lying on its side, as though somebody had stood up too quickly or somebody else had made sure they never stood again. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. No screams. No engines. No arguments. The night had been ordinary. Ordinary nights become terrifying when people vanish inside them. Search teams gathered before dawn. Volunteers combed fields. Hunters checked abandoned cabins. Helicopters moved over frozen farmland, while local radio stations interrupted programming with urgent announcements. Every passing hour transformed hope into desperation. Emily Harper had simply ceased to exist. Then came the first strange detail. A teenager delivering newspapers remembered seeing a dark-colored pickup truck parked near Cedar Street shortly after midnight. Not local. No recognizable markings. The driver remained inside. Engine running. Headlights off. He mentioned it casually. At the time, nobody understood its importance. Weeks later, the memory would become the center of endless speculation. The truck was never identified. The driver was never found. And the town began whispering words nobody wanted to say aloud. Abduction. Murder. Monster. The investigation exploded across county lines. Detectives interviewed former classmates, co-workers, distant relatives, anyone who had spoken to Emily during her final week. Hundreds of leads emerged. Hundreds collapsed. An ex-boyfriend passed a polygraph. A traveling salesman possessed an airtight alibi. A drifter seen near the railroad tracks vanished before authorities could question him, only to be located months later in another state with absolutely no connection to the case. Every promising thread dissolved into nothing. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the silence became. Emily had no known enemies, no financial troubles, no secret relationships, no indication she planned to leave. People do not simply evaporate. Yet she had. Winter tightened its grip. Snow-covered search areas already examined dozens of times. Volunteers returned home. News crews moved on. National attention never arrived. Millfield remained alone with its questions. And questions, left unanswered long enough, develop lives of their own. Rumors spread through diners and church basements. Someone claimed Emily had witnessed illegal activity. Someone else insisted she planned to expose a respected member of the community. Others believed she had run away voluntarily, despite overwhelming evidence suggesting otherwise. Each theory offered comfort, because every theory implied understanding. Reality offered none. Christmas arrived. An empty chair stood in the Harper family home. Gifts remained unopened. Her mother refused to remove Emily's stocking from the fireplace. Her father drove county roads late at night, searching places already searched, convincing himself that persistence alone could defeat the impossible. It cannot. The new year came. The case turned cold. Officially, investigators continued working. Unofficially, momentum died. Boxes filled with reports gathered dust. Witnesses forgot details. Memory, the most fragile form of evidence, began its slow collapse. Years passed. Children grew into adults. Businesses closed. People moved away. But one question refused burial. What happened to Emily Harper? The answer, hidden somewhere beyond reach, remained patient. Because evidence has its own sense of time. And sometimes truth waits for science to catch up. In 1990, DNA analysis existed, but barely in the form modern investigators recognize. Tiny samples meant little. Degraded material often became useless. Laboratories faced limitations impossible to overcome with contemporary methods. Still, one detective insisted on preserving everything. Every fiber, every photograph, every object collected from Emily's home. Colleagues called him obsessive. He called it insurance against ignorance. Detective Raymond Keller spent 32 years carrying that case inside his mind. Retirement never ended his involvement. He attended memorial events, spoke with the family, reviewed evidence when nobody asked him to. People thought he couldn't let go. The truth was simpler. He recognized unfinished business. And unfinished business is weight. The evidence box remained sealed in climate-controlled storage. Inside lay ordinary things. A scarf, a coffee mug, fingerprints belonging to friends and relatives. And one item almost forgotten. A wool coat recovered from Emily's hallway. Initially insignificant. Initially impossible to analyze. Initially destined to become another silent artifact. Near the left sleeve, technicians in 1990 documented microscopic biological material. Too small. Too damaged. Not enough. Technology surrendered. The mystery continued. Decades later, technology returned for revenge. Advancements in forensic genealogy transformed impossible cases into solvable equations. Invisible traces became voices. The dead, long denied justice, suddenly possessed new methods of testimony. Across America, cold cases reopened. Old monsters lost sleep. Millfield watched these developments with cautious hope. Could lightning strike here? Could 30 years of darkness end with a laboratory breakthrough? Most residents doubted it. Hope exhausted itself after enough disappointments. Then the phone rang. State investigators requested access to preserved evidence. No expectations. No promises. Just procedure. Weeks became months. Months stretched into silence. And silence, in cold case investigations, means either failure or history. There is rarely anything in between. The results arrived on a gray morning in early autumn. Analysts isolated a viable DNA profile from the coat. Not partial, not uncertain, complete. The room reportedly fell silent. Veteran investigators understood exactly what they were witnessing. A ghost had left fingerprints. The profile entered national databases. No match. Disappointment returned immediately. But forensic science possessed another weapon unavailable in 1990. Genetic genealogy. Family connections. Distant relatives. Invisible branches extending through generations. The search expanded. Experts constructed family trees. Names emerged. Cross states. Cross decades. Crossed into lives that had never imagined their connection to a forgotten disappearance in rural Pennsylvania. One branch led back to western Ohio. Another pointed toward a man who had died years earlier. Former truck mechanic. Seasonal laborer. Frequent traveler. History of violence never fully prosecuted. His name had never appeared in the original investigation. Not once. Yet records placed him within driving distance of Millfield during November 1990. The coincidence chilled everyone involved. Detectives reopened witness statements. The newspaper delivery boy, now middle-aged, had described a dark pickup truck. The deceased mechanic owned one. Same model, same color, same year. After 3 decades, fragments separated by time suddenly aligned with terrifying precision. The town that once believed evil lived elsewhere prepared itself for an unbearable possibility. Because sometimes the stranger passing through town is not passing through at all. Sometimes he leaves part of himself behind. And sometimes that forgotten trace waits 30 years to tell the truth. Fictional true crime screenplay continued. The name traveled through the investigation room like a sudden drop in temperature. No one recognized it. No veteran detective leaned back and said they remembered interviewing him. No faded report carried his signature. For 32 years, the man had existed entirely outside the boundaries of suspicion, moving through history without leaving enough behind to trigger alarm. And now, because technology had learned to listen to what human beings once called silence, everything changed at once. His name was Daniel Mercer, dead since 2011, 58 years old at the time of his death. Heart failure, buried with military honors after serving briefly in the National Guard decades earlier. A man remembered by neighbors as quiet, hard-working, occasionally distant. The kind of description that appears over and over again in stories nobody wants to tell. Quiet, hard-working, kept to himself. 3 phrases that mean absolutely nothing until years later, when people begin searching their memories for warning signs that never announce themselves. Investigators stared at photographs collected from old employment records. Grainy images, worn edges, a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a jaw permanently locked somewhere between irritation and exhaustion. Nothing extraordinary, nothing memorable, and that was precisely what frightened them. Monsters, contrary to popular imagination, rarely arrive wearing costumes. They blend. They work. They pay taxes. They wave at neighbors. They disappear into ordinary life so completely that communities defend them long after evidence has turned against them. The genealogy team remained cautious. DNA could establish connection. It could establish presence. But presence alone did not tell the entire story. A courtroom demanded more than intuition and coincidence. Yet the timing refused to be ignored. Employment records showed Mercer worked temporary construction contracts across Pennsylvania throughout 1990. One particular assignment placed him less than 40 miles from Millfield during November. 40 miles. Close enough to buy gasoline. Close enough to eat dinner. Close enough to destroy an entire family. Retired Detective Raymond Keller received the phone call late in the afternoon. For several seconds, he said nothing. After 32 years, silence had become part of his relationship with the case. Silence after false leads. Silence after failed searches. Silence after every anniversary when reporters stopped calling and everyone else moved on. Now the silence carried a different weight. He asked only one question. Are we certain? The answer came carefully. No, not yet, but closer than ever. Closer than anyone had imagined possible. Keller drove to the evidence facility the following morning. Employees who had never worked a homicide investigation recognized him immediately. The old detective moved slowly now. White hair, arthritic hands, but his memory remained sharp, preserved by decades of refusing to surrender unfinished business. He stood before the evidence boxes exactly as he had countless times before. Cardboard containers, typed labels, ordinary objects connected to extraordinary suffering. People imagine breakthroughs arriving with dramatic music and celebration. Reality feels different. Reality feels quiet. Reality feels like an old man staring at a box and realizing that something collected during the first Bush administration had waited patiently for the world to become smart enough to understand it. He touched the lid gently. Emily Harper's name remained visible. The ink had faded. The grief had not. Across Millfield, rumors ignited with astonishing speed. Nobody officially released information. Nobody needed to. Small towns possess communication systems more efficient than technology. Conversations inside grocery stores became speculation. Church gatherings transformed into informal briefings. Retirees drinking coffee before sunrise exchanged theories with absolute confidence. DNA, a suspect, an outsider, maybe justice, maybe answers, maybe peace. The Harper family, however, experienced something entirely different. Hope returned, and hope, after decades of absence, can be more terrifying than despair. Emily's mother had spent 30 years adapting to uncertainty. She learned how to celebrate holidays with an empty space permanently reserved at the table. She learned how to answer questions from grandchildren who knew their missing aunt only through photographs. She learned how to survive without resolution. Survival required accepting that answers might never come. Now, suddenly, answers approached. What they brought new pain? What if they proved worse than imagination? What if the mystery that sustained hope finally collapsed into something brutal and irreversible? Closure sounds comforting in theory. Reality rarely cooperates. Investigators expanded their review of Mercer's history. They discovered patterns, not criminal convictions. Patterns. Temporary jobs across multiple states. Frequent movement. Relationships that ended abruptly. Long stretches where documentation became surprisingly thin. One former coworker remembered Mercer mentioning a small Pennsylvania town where he had worked during a harsh winter. Could have been Millfield. Could have been somewhere else. Memory after 3 decades behaves like smoke. People shape it according to what they believe they know. Another witness described Mercer as someone who enjoyed driving alone at night. He preferred back roads, avoided attention, liked silence. None of it constituted evidence. All of it felt uncomfortable. Then investigators found something unexpected. An old maintenance log from a construction company. November 15th, 1990. Vehicle repair entry. Dark blue pickup truck. Front right fender damage. Reported by Daniel Mercer. No explanation attached. The date landed like a thunderclap. Emily disappeared during the night of November 14th. The truck witnessed near Cedar Street had been described as dark-colored. The coincidence became impossible to ignore. Still, coincidence remained legally meaningless. Emotion cannot replace proof. Science had opened the door. Detectives still needed to walk through it. They approached surviving relatives, collected voluntary DNA samples, built broader genetic connections. Every result strengthened the same conclusion. The biological material recovered from Emily's coat belonged to someone directly connected to Daniel Mercer. Probability calculations reached astronomical levels. Experts spoke carefully. The language of science values precision over drama. But even precision carries emotional force when attached to a 30-year-old mystery. Millfield prepared itself for impact. News organizations arrived. Satellite trucks appeared near locations that had remained peaceful for decades. Young reporters interviewed elderly residents who suddenly found themselves revisiting memories buried beneath entire lifetimes. The phrase appeared everywhere. Cold case breakthrough. Shocking DNA discovery. Mystery nearing resolution. Communities love those words. They imply order. They imply that evil eventually loses. They imply that time itself serves justice. Reality remains more complicated. Because Daniel Mercer was dead. No arrest. No interrogation. No confession. No courtroom confrontation. The man most likely connected to Emily Harper's disappearance had carried his secrets into the grave. For many people, that felt unbearable. Justice delayed is painful. Justice denied by death carries a different cruelty altogether. Investigators searched properties Mercer once owned. Nothing. They examined storage units long emptied. Nothing. They reviewed missing person cases near locations where he worked. Disturbing similarities emerged, but nothing definitive. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Had Emily been his only victim? Had chance simply preserved evidence in this one case, while others vanished forever? Was Millfield witnessing resolution, or merely discovering the edge of something far darker? The uncertainty spread like winter fog. Retired Detective Keller resisted public celebration. Journalists wanted interviews. He declined. Politicians praised advancements in forensic science. He remained silent. Friends congratulated him on finally solving the case. He corrected them immediately. Solving required understanding everything. Understanding required truth. And truth still contained gaps large enough to swallow entire decades. One evening, Keller drove alone to Cedar Street. Emily's house no longer stood. A newer home occupied the property now. Different family, different memories. Children played in a yard where investigators once searched for microscopic evidence beneath frozen grass. Life continues with astonishing indifference to tragedy. The old detective parked across the road, watched sunset settle over the neighborhood. 32 years earlier, he had promised Emily's father that he would never stop trying. The father died before hearing about the DNA results. Cancer. He carried uncertainty to his grave. Keller remembered that conversation vividly. A grieving man standing beside a patrol car, hands shaking, voice barely functioning. Just find her. Please, just find her. Some promises survive longer than the people who make them. The wind moved through bare trees. The neighborhood remained quiet. Yet Keller felt no victory, only exhaustion, only the immense weight of time, because the case had changed shape but not disappeared. One mystery solved often reveals another waiting underneath. If Mercer took Emily, where had he taken her? Why her? What happened during those final hours? Why leave behind so little? The DNA answer who. Human beings still needed why. And why is the question that destroys sleep. Months later, a renewed search effort began using modern technology unavailable in 1990. Ground-penetrating radar, digital mapping systems, geographic profiling methods refined through decades of criminal analysis. Investigators identified locations Mercer visited repeatedly while working near Millfield. Abandoned farm roads, remote clearings, areas long reclaimed by forest. Volunteers returned. Some were grandchildren of original searchers. History repeated itself with different faces. Metal detectors swept across frozen earth. Dogs trained in human remains detection moved carefully through undergrowth. Every signal accelerated heartbeats. Every false alarm deepened frustration. The land guarded its secrets with remarkable loyalty. Then came another strange detail. A retired gas station owner recognized Mercer's photograph during a television interview. The memory arrived unexpectedly. A man buying fuel late at night, mud covering his truck, scratches along the passenger side, hands trembling slightly while counting cash. The date? Impossible to guarantee, but he believed it happened around the same week Emily vanished. Investigators documented everything. Useful? Maybe. Reliable? Nobody knew. The human mind edits history continuously. Still, even uncertain memories contribute to larger pictures. And larger pictures sometimes reveal horrors invisible at close range. Winter returned to Millfield. Snow-covered roads once more. The same season, the same cold. Only the questions had changed. For 30 years, residents asked what happened. Now they asked how much of the truth remained permanently beyond reach. Because DNA can identify a ghost, it cannot force that ghost to speak. And somewhere beneath Pennsylvania's soil, hidden by time, weather, and silence, the final chapter of Emily Harper's story still waited to be found. The forest had grown older than the investigation itself. Pines that stood waist-high in the winter of 1990 now towered above the search teams like silent witnesses refusing to testify. Their roots had twisted through decades of snow and rain, wrapping themselves around forgotten objects, swallowing tire tracks, burying the geography of memory beneath layers of time. Somewhere inside that wilderness, people believed the truth still existed. Not dead, not gone, simply hidden. Raymond Keller understood forests. They kept secrets because human beings asked the wrong questions. The renewed search began before sunrise. No television cameras, no dramatic announcements, just cold air, heavy equipment, and a handful of investigators carrying 30 years of unfinished conversations inside their heads. Young officers walked beside retirees. Technology walked beside instinct. History walked beside regret. The maps spread across folding tables looked nothing like the hand-drawn sketches from 1990. Satellite imaging revealed patterns nobody had noticed before. Old service roads, abandoned quarry entrances, logging paths erased from modern records. Places where a man seeking isolation could disappear without effort. Daniel Mercer had preferred isolated routes. That fact appeared repeatedly. He avoided highways whenever possible, paid cash, slept in cheap motels, worked temporary jobs, and moved before familiarity became expectation. He lived like someone permanently preparing for departure, or permanently escaping arrival. The behavioral analysts avoided grand conclusions. Predators came in many forms. Some planned, some reacted, some carried darkness carefully organized inside them for years. Others discovered it in a single catastrophic moment. Mercer remained an equation with missing variables. And missing variables create dangerous assumptions. Snow began falling shortly after noon. Thin flakes, quiet flakes, the kind that transformed landscapes without anyone noticing. Search dogs moved through the underbrush with disciplined patience. Their handlers spoke little. Every pause carried possibility. Every change in direction forced hearts into temporary suspension. Then came the signal. A dog stopped, rigid, focused. The atmosphere changed immediately. No shouting, no celebration. Experience had taught everyone caution. Ground crews marked the location. An isolated depression nearly half a mile from an abandoned maintenance road. Nothing visible, no obvious evidence. Just instinct, training, and the unsettling certainty that something below the surface demanded attention. Excavation equipment arrived slowly. The earth resisted, roots tangled with old stones. Years of natural change had rewritten everything. By late afternoon, investigators uncovered fragments. Not human, animal remains. Ancient, irrelevant. Disappointment settled across the site with familiar cruelty. False hope carried its own exhaustion. Raymond Keller watched silently. 32 years earlier, failures like this destroyed momentum. Now, they merely reinforced persistence. Truth, he believed, possessed extraordinary patience. Human beings simply lacked the discipline to match it. Back in Millfield, the town existed inside a strange contradiction. People wanted answers. People feared answers. The local diner remained crowded every evening. Conversations stopped whenever unfamiliar faces entered. Journalists still wandered through streets, searching for emotional reactions and dramatic statements. Most residents offered neither. Time had changed them. The original tragedy belonged to memory now, and memory behaves differently from immediate grief. It softens certain edges while sharpening others. Small details survive. Large explanations vanish. Mrs. Eleanor Briggs remembered the smell of wood smoke the week Emily disappeared. Nothing else. Thomas Reed remembered a police helicopter passing above his farm. Nothing else. A retired teacher remembered seeing Emily return library books 2 days before she vanished. Nothing unusual. Nothing important. And yet people held onto these fragments because fragments proved they had been there when history shifted beneath their feet. The Harper family remained at the center of everything. Emily's mother refused interviews. She had spent decades becoming private. Public curiosity offered no comfort. But one evening, she agreed to meet Raymond Keller. The conversation happened in her living room. Same house, same photographs, same absence. Only age had changed. She poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Keller noticed the empty chair near the window. It remained untouched. 36 years. No one sat there. No one questioned why. Some grief evolves into ritual, and rituals become architecture. I always thought she would come home, she said quietly. Keller did not answer. Experience had taught him that certain statements existed beyond agreement or contradiction. They simply existed. I knew people believed she was dead. I heard them. I understood them. But understanding something isn't the same as accepting it. Outside, snow drifted across the yard. The world continued moving. Inside, time remained complicated. What if this man really did it? She asked. Still no answer, because another question waited underneath. What if he did not? DNA connected Mercer to evidence. Strongly, persuasively. But mysteries built across decades develop layers impossible to separate cleanly. Keller had seen investigations collapse because certainty arrived too early. He refused to make that mistake now. The next breakthrough emerged from a place nobody expected. An estate attorney in Ohio contacted state investigators after recognizing Mercer's name in national coverage. One of his former clients, deceased for several years, had maintained storage lockers forgotten by surviving relatives. The contents awaited auction. Standard procedure. Ordinary business. Until someone noticed old newspaper clippings. Pennsylvania publications. November 1990. Millfield mentioned repeatedly. Investigators moved immediately. The storage facility stood outside Dayton, surrounded by warehouses and neglected industrial buildings. Dust coated everything. Rust consumed the metal doors. The air smelled of oil and forgotten decades. Inside locker number 17 sat a lifetime reduced to cardboard. Tools, fishing equipment, military memorabilia, receipts, photographs. Nothing extraordinary. Until they found the box. Small, unmarked, locked. Forensic teams documented every angle before opening it. Silence filled the room. Not anticipation. Professional caution. The lock broke with minimal effort. Inside rested dozens of newspaper clippings arranged with unsettling precision. Missing persons. Unsolved crimes. Disappearances across multiple states. Women. Young. Ordinary lives interrupted by extraordinary violence. Dates circled in red ink. Notes scribbled in margins. Some locations matched Mercer's employment history. Others did not. One article carried a headline from Pennsylvania. Local woman vanishes without trace. Emily Harper. The paper had yellowed with age. Fold marks crossed the photograph. The image itself remained clear. Investigators exchanged glances without speaking. People collect strange things. Morbid curiosity exists. Obsession exists. None of that automatically establishes guilt. But context matters. Context changes everything. And Daniel Mercer, a man connected through DNA to evidence in Emily Harper's home, had apparently preserved news coverage about her disappearance for decades. The discovery transformed speculation into something colder, something heavier. Behavioral specialists examined the collection. Patterns emerged. Control, organization, repetition. The careful preservation suggested emotional significance beyond casual interest. Yet even now, certainty remained elusive. Human beings construct meaning from incomplete information. The danger lies in loving conclusions more than truth. Winter deepened. Search operations continued. The forest remained silent. And somewhere within that silence, Raymond Keller began confronting a possibility he had avoided for years. Perhaps mysteries never truly end. Perhaps they simply narrow. Perhaps justice, when arriving decades late, resembles understanding more than victory. He drove home one evening beneath heavy snowfall. Roads empty, radio silent. The world reduced to headlights and memory. At a traffic light, he suddenly remembered something insignificant from 1990. A detail buried beneath thousands of reports. Emily had borrowed a novel from the library days before she vanished. A detective had intended to ask about it. Never did. The title surfaced unexpectedly now. A story about disappearances. About hidden identities. About people living double lives. Coincidence, probably. Meaningless. And yet investigations survive because someone refuses to ignore meaningless things. He parked the car. Sat without moving. Snow accumulated across the windshield. 36 years. An entire lifetime. Still chasing shadows. Still believing shadows belonged to something real. Far away, beyond the sleeping town and the dark tree lines and the roads Daniel Mercer once traveled, the earth kept its silence. But silence, Keller knew better than anyone, was never the same thing as innocence. It was merely the interval between one revelation and the next. Night settled over Millfield with the slow certainty of old guilt. Snow covered the roads. Storefront lights vanished one by one. Curtains closed. Doors locked. Yet inside the temporary command center established for the renewed investigation, nobody thought about sleep. The cardboard box recovered from Daniel Mercer's forgotten storage unit sat beneath sterile lights like an object excavated from another civilization. People expected answers. What they found instead were patterns. Patterns frightened experienced investigators more than confessions. Confessions belong to single moments. Patterns belong to entire lives. Every newspaper clipping had been preserved with impossible care. Dates aligned chronologically. Certain names carried circles in red ink. Others bore tiny handwritten symbols nobody understood. A triangle, a slash, occasionally a single letter. R, M, Ush. No explanation, no legend, no key. Just fragments of a private language buried alongside a private darkness. Forensic analysts photographed every page. Behavioral specialists studied arrangement methods. Historians traced publication origins. The work resembled archaeology more than police procedure. Dig carefully. Assume nothing. Respect the dead, even when the dead deserve none. One article immediately drew attention. It described the disappearance of a college student in western Ohio during the spring of 1984. 20 years old. Last seen leaving a late-night diner. Vehicle discovered abandoned near a wooded service road. No arrests. No body. No resolution. A red circle surrounded her photograph. The same red circle appeared around Emily Harper's image. Coincidence remained possible. Probability became uncomfortable. Raymond Keller examined the documents in complete silence. He understood how dangerous assumptions could become. Entire investigations had collapsed because detectives fell in love with theories. The human mind craved symmetry. One predator, multiple victims, hidden connections waiting to be discovered. Reality often preferred chaos. Still, chaos itself leaves fingerprints. And Daniel Mercer had apparently spent decades preserving stories about vanished women. The question changed. No longer who, no longer when. Why? Why keep these memories alive? Why carry newspaper clippings across state lines and changing addresses? Why lock them away instead of destroying them? The answers remained hidden behind a wall no interrogation could penetrate. Mercer had died 11 years earlier. Heart failure. Natural causes. An ordinary death for a profoundly extraordinary mystery. The dead never negotiate. They never correct misunderstandings. They never explain themselves. They simply leave the living to assemble broken pieces without instructions. Outside, reporters continued gathering near Town Hall. National attention had arrived at last. Cold case specialists appeared on television. Former prosecutors offered opinions. Retired detectives from distant states called with possible leads. Everyone wanted participation. Everyone wanted closure. Nobody understood that closure rarely resembled satisfaction. It resembled exhaustion. Meanwhile, another discovery emerged from the storage locker. A road atlas, Pennsylvania edition, worn beyond ordinary use. Pages folded repeatedly. Coffee stains. Handwritten markings. And there, less than 20 miles outside Millfield, investigators found a route circled in black ink. An abandoned logging corridor closed in the late 1980s. No modern traffic. No nearby homes. No reason for casual visitors. The circle carried no explanation. Only a date. November 1990. The room fell silent. Technology had revealed the DNA. Human obsession had preserved the map. Now history demanded another search. Preparations began before sunrise. Heavy equipment, forensic teams, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar units capable of seeing what previous generations never could. The convoy moved through snow-covered roads while residents watched from porches and kitchen windows. Nobody spoke. Entire communities understand sacred moments without instruction. The logging corridor appeared untouched by civilization. Trees crowded narrow pathways. Fallen branches blocked access points. Nature had reclaimed everything with ruthless efficiency. Mercer, investigators believed, would have preferred it that way. Isolation offers opportunity. Isolation offers silence. Isolation offers time. The search expanded methodically. Grid patterns, precise measurements. No assumptions. No dramatic gestures. Just disciplined patience. Hours passed. Nothing. Then radar equipment detected an anomaly beneath a clearing 70 yards from the old road. Not large, not definitive, but unusual. Excavation teams moved carefully. The first layers revealed only soil and roots. Another foot downward exposed fragments of rusted metal. Old farming equipment, abandoned decades earlier. Disappointment arrived once again. Yet one investigator noticed something strange. The equipment had been deliberately buried. Not discarded. Buried. Human effort. Human intention. Questions multiplied. The area expanded. Additional scanning began. Another anomaly emerged. Then another. The land, silent for decades, suddenly seemed full of hidden stories. Most proved harmless. Industrial debris. Animal remains. Forgotten machinery. The ordinary garbage of previous generations. Still, every false lead strengthened one unsettling truth. Daniel Mercer knew places ordinary people never visited. Back in Millfield, Emily Harper's mother sat alone beside the living room window as evening approached. Snow drifted softly through the darkness. She no longer expected miracles. Miracles belong to younger people. Age teaches different lessons. Age teaches endurance. Yet somewhere inside her, a fragile possibility continued breathing. Perhaps the truth existed. Perhaps her daughter had not vanished into absolute nothingness. Perhaps memory and science together could accomplish what neither achieved alone. She reached for an old photograph. Emily at 19, laughing. Summer sunlight. A future nobody imagined could be interrupted. Photographs preserve certainty. Life rarely does. Across town, Raymond Keller reviewed forgotten witness statements from 1990. Thousands of pages. Countless interviews. Most contain nothing. Human beings remember trivial details while missing catastrophe unfolding directly beside them. Then he found a single paragraph. A gas station attendant. Interview conducted 3 days after Emily disappeared. The witness described a man purchasing fuel shortly after dawn. Dark pickup truck. Mud covering the tires. Hands scraped and bleeding. The driver appeared exhausted. Agitated. He asked for directions toward Interstate 80. Investigators followed the lead at the time. Nothing came of it. The description remained frustratingly vague. White male. Heavy build. Brown jacket. America contained millions. But now, with Mercer's image fixed in everyone's mind, the old testimony carried fresh significance. Memory changes when context changes. Dangerously so. Keller knew this. He resisted easy conclusions. Still, resistance became harder every day. The evidence continued pointing in one direction. The dead man at the center of everything remained silent. Yet silence itself had begun speaking. That evening, forensic analysts made another unexpected discovery inside Mercer's papers. A motel receipt, dated November 13th, 1990. Location, 30 miles from Millfield. Cash payment, 1 night. No luggage recorded. The timing aligned perfectly with Emily's final known movements. Coincidence, critics argued. Possible, but coincidences accumulate. Eventually, they become architecture. The public narrative shifted overnight. News anchors spoke about shocking developments. Former cold cases from neighboring states reopened under renewed scrutiny. Families of missing women contacted investigators. Hope spread. Fear spread faster. What if Daniel Mercer represented something larger? What if Emily Harper had merely been the one case fortunate enough to preserve evidence across time? No authority offered public speculation. Responsible investigators understood limitations. But private conversations grew increasingly dark. Predators who avoid detection for decades rarely stop after one opportunity. The possibility haunted everyone. Winter storms intensified. Search operations paused temporarily. The forest proclaimed its silence. Inside evidence rooms, however, the past continued unfolding. A forensic document specialist examined Mercer's handwritten symbols and noticed repetition connected to geographic locations. Not initials, coordinates, abbreviated references. The triangle appeared near wooded areas. The slash marked highways. The letter H consistently accompanied rivers or creeks. A personal system. A map known only to one man. Dead men leave strange inheritances. Some leave money. Some leave property. Daniel Mercer left questions. Questions heavy enough to survive generations. Raymond Keller returned home after midnight. He removed his coat slowly, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. The house remained quiet. Retirement had taught him how loud silence could become. For decades, he imagined solving Emily's case would feel triumphant. He imagined relief, celebration, peace. Instead, he felt older, more tired, more aware of everything justice could never restore. Truth carried value. Truth also carried cost. Outside his window, snow continued falling across Millfield, covering roads, fences, and forgotten tracks in equal measure. Natura persist no fabrics. It concealed innocence and guilt with identical efficiency. And somewhere beyond the sleeping town, beyond abandoned logging roads and hidden clearings, beyond the reach of memory itself, the final pieces of Daniel Mercer's secret life remained buried beneath earth that had learned long ago how to keep human promises. The question no longer haunting investigators was whether the mystery would deepen. It was how much darkness waited beneath the answers they had already found. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of white skies. 3 days of buried roads. 3 days in which Millfield existed inside a frozen silence, so complete that even ordinary sounds felt intrusive. Church bells seemed louder. Truck engines echoed farther. Human voices carried an unfamiliar weight. And somewhere beneath that silence, investigators continued assembling the life of a dead man who had never intended to leave a map behind. Daniel Mercer had spent decades moving through America like a shadow attached to temporary places. Construction contracts, maintenance work, seasonal labor, 6 months here, 8 months there. No roots, no permanence, no community strong enough to ask difficult questions when he disappeared again. People trusted familiarity. Mercer understood something more dangerous. People also trusted loneliness. The files spread across the command center, covered entire walls now. Timelines intersected with highways. Employment records overlapped with unsolved disappearances. Motel receipts sat beside newspaper clippings. Every thread suggested possibility. None delivered certainty. That distinction mattered. Raymond Keller repeated it constantly. Possibility is not proof. Suspicion is not history. The dead deserve truth, not mythology. Yet even he could not ignore what the evidence seemed determined to reveal. The same pattern appeared over and over. A temporary job, a period of isolation, a nearby disappearance. Then movement, always movement, as though remaining in one place too long threatened something Mercer desperately needed to protect. Or escape. On the 4th morning, weather conditions finally improved. Search teams returned to the logging corridor marked inside the road atlas. The forest greeted them without ceremony. Snow clung to branches. Ice covered shallow streams. The air possessed that strange stillness unique to winter landscapes, a stillness that made every footstep sound like an interruption. Ground-penetrating radar units resumed their work. Methodical, patient, unemotional, machines carried no expectations. Human beings supplied those themselves. By noon, technicians identified another anomaly deeper inside the woods. Larger than previous findings. Irregular in shape. Difficult to interpret. Layer after layer disappeared. Frozen soil. Tree roots. Compacted earth. Then metal. Not farming equipment this time. A rusted oil drum. Buried vertically. Sealed. No markings. The discovery altered everything. Investigators exchanged cautious glances. Experience taught restraint. The most dramatic possibilities rarely proved correct. Still, nobody ignored the implications. The drum emerged slowly. Time had damaged its surface. Corrosion spread across every inch. Forensic specialists documented each step before opening it. Inside, they found nothing human. Old tools, chains, lengths of wire, construction materials, abandoned decades earlier. Disappointment returned with familiar cruelty. Yet one question remained. Why bury useful equipment in a remote forest? Why hide ordinary objects beneath layers of earth? The answer refused to appear. And unanswered questions possess extraordinary gravity. Back in Millfield, the town existed under siege for memory. Residents who had spent years avoiding discussions about Emily Harper now found themselves unable to escape them. Television crews occupied sidewalks. Podcasters arrived with microphones and theories. Internet forums transformed local tragedy into national fascination. The people who actually lived through 1990 watched with quiet discomfort. They remembered fear. They remembered uncertainty. They remembered searching fields with flashlights while believing absolutely that Emily would be found alive. The world remembered only mystery. Mystery sells. Grief does not. Emily's mother refused every request for interviews. Her silence became a story itself. Journalists called it dignity. Neighbors called it survival. She called it exhaustion. 36 years had taught her a difficult lesson. Public attention arrives late and leaves early. Loss remains. One evening, she opened a cedar chest stored in the upstairs bedroom. Inside rested objects untouched since the early 90s. School awards, birthday cards, old letters, a faded cassette tape labeled simply in Emily's handwriting. Summer songs. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing historical. Just evidence that a human life once moved confidently toward a future that never arrived. She placed the tape into an aging player. Music filled the room. Soft, distant, young. For a moment, memory defeated time. For a moment, Emily existed not as a victim, not as a mystery, not as a headline, but as a daughter laughing somewhere beyond the reach of tragedy. Then reality returned. Reality always returns. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, another piece of Daniel Mercer's past emerged unexpectedly. A retired motel owner in Indiana recognized his photograph during a news broadcast. The call reached investigators shortly after midnight. The memory was imperfect. Old memories usually are. Yet certain details remained vivid. Mercer had stayed at the motel during the late 80s. Paid cash. Requested rooms facing wooded areas rather than parking lots. Avoided conversation. One night, according to the owner, he returned with mud covering his boots and what appeared to be scratches along both hands. The explanation? Vehicle trouble. Nothing unusual. Nothing memorable. Until decades later, investigators documented the account, added another pin to an increasingly crowded map. Patterns. Always patterns. The danger lay in seeing too much. The greater danger lay in ignoring what repeatedly presented itself. Raymond Keller understood both risks. He spent nights reviewing old evidence with almost ritual precision. Coffee, yellowed reports, handwritten notes from officers long retired or deceased, ghosts speaking through paperwork. Then he found something remarkable. An interview transcript buried inside supplemental files. A hunter questioned in November of 1990. The man reported seeing tire tracks leading toward the abandoned logging corridor days after Emily vanished. Investigators examined the location. Snowfall erased everything. The lead died immediately. Forgotten. Ignored. Until now, Keller stared at the report for several minutes. The date aligned. The location aligned. The memory, preserved accidentally by bureaucracy, suddenly mattered. How many answers, he wondered, had existed from the beginning? How many truths had remained invisible simply because human beings lacked the tools to recognize them? Technology changes investigations. It also changes history. Across America, cold cases once considered impossible had yielded to DNA analysis, forensic genealogy, digital reconstruction. Science moved forward. The dead waited patiently. Millfield now stood inside that transformation. Yet despite every advancement, one reality remained stubbornly unchanged. Daniel Mercer would never speak. No interrogation room, no confession, no explanation, no opportunity to ask the question haunting everyone involved. Why Emily? Why that house? Why that night? Human beings crave motive because motive creates order. Order creates comfort. Comfort creates the illusion of understanding. But evil often operates without narratives satisfying enough for ordinary minds. The storm clouds finally disappeared. A pale winter sun emerged. Search teams expanded operations farther north, near an old creek bed marked with one of Mercer's mysterious symbols. The terrain proved difficult. Dense vegetation, steep inclines, limited access. Exactly the kind of place a person seeking privacy might choose. Cadaver dogs moved carefully. Handlers remained silent. Hours passed. Then one dog stopped. Completely. No movement. No distraction. Absolute focus. The signal carried immediate weight. Experience separated this reaction from previous false alarms. Investigators marked the location. Excavation began. Slowly. Carefully. Nobody spoke louder than necessary. The forest itself seemed to listen. Several inches below the surface, workers uncovered fabric fragments. Weathered. Ancient. Impossible to identify immediately. The atmosphere changed. Not excitement. Something older. Something heavier. Hope and dread occupying the same space. Forensic specialists took over. Every motion deliberate. Every photograph documented. The work continued until sunset forced suspension. Nothing definitive emerged before darkness arrived. But nobody left unchanged. The possibility alone altered everything. Millfield waited through another sleepless night. Kitchen lights remained on later than usual. Conversations stretched longer. Television screens flickered inside living rooms where residents had spent decades pretending the past belonged safely behind them. The past, however, possesses extraordinary patience. It waits. It survives. It returns when least expected. Raymond Keller drove home beneath clear skies. Stars filled the darkness above Pennsylvania. He remembered his first year as a detective. Young, confident, certain that effort guaranteed results. Life corrected that illusion quickly. Some mysteries resist entire generations. Some answers arrive only after the people who needed them most are gone. He parked outside his house, but remained inside the vehicle, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on nothing. Tomorrow, investigators would continue excavating near the creek. Tomorrow might reveal everything, or nothing. After 36 years, both possibilities felt equally believable. The cold air settled around Millfield. The forest remained silent. And beneath frozen ground that had guarded its secrets longer than many human lives, something waited with a patience only time itself could understand. Dawn arrived without color. The sun rose somewhere behind a blanket of gray clouds, but the forest refused to acknowledge it. Frost covered every branch. Thin sheets of ice shimmered along the creek bed. The world looked preserved rather than alive, as though nature itself understood that certain places existed outside ordinary time. Search teams returned before 6 in the morning. Nobody joked. Nobody made predictions. Veterans of long investigations learn a brutal lesson early. Expectation is the fastest route to disappointment. The excavation site near the creek remained exactly as they had left it. Yellow markers, protective tarps, a silence heavy enough to feel physical. The fragments discovered the previous evening lay secured inside evidence containers awaiting laboratory analysis. Initial observations suggested old fabric, natural fibers, significant age. Human origin? Unknown. Associated with Emily Harper? Unknown. Connected to Daniel Mercer? Unknown. The list of unknowns continued growing. Yet something had changed. For the first time in decades, investigators no longer searched blindly. They followed a trail. Faint, Broken, dangerously incomplete, but real. Raymond Keller arrived carrying a thermos of black coffee and 36 years of caution. Younger officers watched him with quiet respect. To them, he represented institutional memory itself, the last living bridge to the original investigation. He hated the role. Memory, he believed, could become a prison as easily as a guide. Still, he walked the perimeter carefully, studying terrain he had visited as a much younger man. The creek looked smaller now. Everything from the past always did. One of the forensic archaeologists approached him. There are indications of disturbance beyond the original excavation zone. Keller said nothing. The specialist continued. Not recent. Decades old. Different soil density. Unnatural layering. Human activity. 3 words capable of accelerating every heartbeat in the forest. The search radius expanded immediately. Flags appeared among the trees. Measurements were taken. Data entered digital systems unimaginable back in 1990. Technology transformed uncertainty into coordinates. But coordinates still required courage. By late morning, another object emerged from beneath frozen earth. A metal button, corroded, plain, no identifying marks. Ordinary. And because it was ordinary, everyone became nervous. Extraordinary evidence announces itself. Ordinary evidence forces people to imagine stories. The button moved to forensic processing. The digging continued. Hours passed. No dramatic discoveries. No hidden graves. No shocking revelations. Only work. Cold, repetitive, exhausting work. Truth, Keller often said, rarely arrives with music. It arrives wearing mud. Meanwhile, inside the temporary command center, analysts continued decoding Mercer's handwritten symbols. The triangle, the slash, the letter H. Patterns emerged gradually. The triangle consistently appeared near elevated ground. The slash marked major travel routes. H corresponded not to rivers, as originally suspected, but to hunting areas. Private abbreviations. Personal geography. A map designed for one pair of eyes. Daniel Mercer had navigated the world according to systems nobody else understood. That realization unsettled behavioral experts. Private codes imply private rituals. Private rituals imply repetition. And repetition suggests experience. The question hanging above every conversation remained impossible to ignore. How many times had he done something nobody ever discovered? National media now called him a suspected serial offender. Investigators refused the label publicly. Evidence demanded restraint. Speculation demanded nothing. The difference mattered. To families still searching for loved ones, words carried enormous weight. One careless statement could ignite false hope across multiple states. Keller understood this better than anyone. He had spent decades watching hope rise and collapse. Hope is beautiful. Hope is dangerous. Hope convinces people that persistence guarantees reward. Reality offers no such contract. At Emily Harper's childhood church, candles burned continuously. Residents came quietly. No organized events. No cameras. No speeches. Just people sitting in wooden pews, confronting memories they had stored away for half their lives. Mrs. Eleanor Briggs remembered teaching Emily in Sunday school. Thomas Reed remembered helping search cornfields. Others remembered almost nothing. Faces faded. Voices disappeared. Yet everyone remembered fear. Fear survives where details do not. Outside, snow began falling again. Soft. Relentless. Winter had returned to finish conversations started decades earlier. Emily's mother remained inside her home. The cassette tape still rested beside the player. She had listened to it 3 times. Each song felt like a message arriving from another universe. A universe where November 1990 ended differently. A universe where daughters grew older alongside their parents. A universe untouched by mystery. Human beings construct those alternate realities instinctively, not because they believe them, because imagining them hurts slightly less than accepting the truth. The phone rang shortly after noon. Raymond Keller. His voice remained measured. Careful. Nothing definitive. Still investigating. Still searching. She thanked him. After all these years, gratitude had become habit. So had disappointment. Neither surprised her anymore. Back in the woods, excavation reached deeper layers. Tree roots twisted through the soil like veins. Nature had spent 36 years reclaiming ownership. Human beings, temporary by comparison, attempted to negotiate with time itself. Then the dogs reacted. Not one, 3. Independent alerts. Same location. The atmosphere changed instantly. No excitement, only gravity. Experienced handlers recognized the significance. Animals do not care about theories. They respond to what exists. Additional forensic specialists moved into position. Work slowed deliberately. Every inch mattered. Every decision carried consequences. The earth yielded another secret. Fragments of leather, weathered almost beyond recognition. Possibly part of a boot. Possibly something else entirely. Laboratory confirmation would take time. Time. The one resource nobody wanted and everyone required. The discovery forced investigators to review old evidence inventories once again. Emily Harper had been wearing hiking boots on the evening before she disappeared. Brown leather. Standard design. Mass-produced. Thousands existed across the country. Coincidence remained possible. Coincidence always remained possible. Yet the human mind resists endless coincidence. At some point, patterns demand acknowledgement. Sunset approached. Operations paused. Evidence traveled under secure transport. The forest returned to silence. But not the same silence. Something had shifted. Invisible. Intangible. Real. Raymond Keller remained behind after most personnel departed. He walked toward the creek alone. Snowflakes drifted through fading light. The landscape looked peaceful, almost sacred. He tried remembering his first visit here in 1990. Younger officers. Flashlights. Desperation. Everyone believing they stood days away from answers. Nobody understanding that decades would pass first. He closed his eyes. Memory arrived in fragments. Voices. Radio chatter. Emily's father insisting they search one more area. One more field. One more road. Grief makes negotiators of us all. One more chance. One more hour. One more miracle. The miracle never came. At least not then. Keller opened his eyes. The creek continued flowing beneath thin sheets of ice. Water possesses a remarkable indifference to human tragedy. It moves forward. Always. The living struggle to do the same. Later that evening, laboratory technicians completed preliminary examinations on the recovered button. Manufacturing date, late 1980s. Common workwear component. No unique identifiers. No immediate connection. Another ordinary object inside an extraordinary mystery. The leather fragments proved more interesting. Animal hide. Heavy-duty construction. Consistent with outdoor footwear. Age impossible to determine precisely without further analysis. Again, possibilities. Again, uncertainty. Again, the maddening rhythm that defines every genuine investigation. The command center remained active deep into the night. Maps covered tables. Coffee cooled untouched. Digital timelines expanded across computer screens. Daniel Mercer's life, once invisible, now existed as thousands of data points. And yet the man himself remained fundamentally unknowable. People wanted villains they could understand. Reality preferred strangers. Outside, Millfield slept beneath fresh snow. Streetlights reflected against empty roads. Homes remained warm. Families gathered. Children laughed. Life continued. It always does. But somewhere beyond the town limits, inside forests older than memory and secrets older than justice, the ground had begun surrendering pieces of a story nobody was fully prepared to hear. And Raymond Keller, standing at the edge of retirement's final years, understood a truth more unsettling than any evidence they might uncover. Finding answers would not end the haunting. It would merely give the haunting a name. The laboratory report arrived at 2:17 in the morning. Nobody celebrated. Nobody raised their voice. Years of experience had conditioned every investigator to fear certainty arriving too quickly. The leather fragments recovered near the creek were old, extremely old. Weather exposure suggested decades beneath the soil. The construction matched heavy outdoor footwear manufactured throughout the late 1980s and early 90s. Nothing conclusive, nothing impossible. Another piece without a completed picture. Yet the timing unsettled everyone, because the earth had remained silent for 36 years. And now, suddenly, it seemed willing to speak. Raymond Keller never went home. Coffee replaced sleep. Habit replaced comfort. He sat alone beneath fluorescent lights, studying maps that had become more familiar than his own neighborhood. Red markers covered Pennsylvania. Blue lines traced Mercer's employment routes. Yellow notes identified witness statements previously dismissed as insignificant. Insignificant things, Keller had learned, possessed extraordinary patience. They waited. They survived. They returned when human beings finally developed the humility to listen. Outside, Millfield remained asleep. Inside the command center, history refused rest. A younger investigator named Sarah Donnelly entered carrying a stack of digitized records recovered from county archives. "Found something strange," she said quietly. Keller looked up. Strange had become their most common currency. She placed the documents on the table. Hunting permits, issued in 1989 and renewed in 1990. Daniel Mercer. The location authorized for seasonal access lay directly north of the logging corridor, less than 12 miles from the creek. Silence filled the room, not because the information proved guilt, because it proved familiarity. Mercer knew the terrain, not casually, intimately. He possessed legal access to remote land few residents ever visited. He understood roads absent from modern maps. He knew where isolation lived. And isolation, investigators understood, changes the mathematics of crime. The discovery forced another uncomfortable question. Had he chosen Millfield randomly? Or had he been studying the region long before Emily Harper vanished? Questions multiplied. Answers remained scarce. By sunrise, search operations expanded again. The forest greeted them with absolute indifference. Birds moved through frozen branches. Water flowed beneath ice. Nature continued performing ancient routines, while human beings attempted to reconstruct a single terrible interruption from 36 years earlier. Ground teams advanced farther north. The terrain grew harsher. Steeper inclines, dense undergrowth, abandoned hunting structures collapsing beneath years of neglect. One such structure immediately attracted attention. A wooden blind, half consumed by moss and weather. No obvious significance. Yet Mercer's permit records placed him within this exact area. Investigators documented everything. Inside, they found old cans, rusting tools, fragments of newspaper used as insulation, ordinary debris. Then someone noticed the dates. November 1990. The paper crumbled at the touch, but the date remained visible. The atmosphere shifted. Again, always again. History kept circling back toward the same narrow window of time. A forensic team secured the material. Analysis would determine nothing dramatic, most likely. Still, in long investigations, ordinary discoveries accumulate pressure. Eventually, pressure transforms landscapes. Back in town, national attention intensified. Cable news programs debated the case. Experts who had never visited Pennsylvania spoke confidently about behavioral patterns and offender psychology. Residents watched with quiet irritation. Television demanded narratives. Real life offered complications. Emily Harper had been a daughter, a friend, a librarian who remembered children's birthdays and returned borrowed books personally when elderly residents couldn't travel. Now strangers discussed her life between commercial breaks. Grief becomes public property faster than anyone expects. Her mother ignored the broadcasts. Instead, she visited the cemetery. Not Emily's grave. There wasn't one. Her husband's. She stood beside the stone in complete silence. 36 years of marriage, 18 years of widowhood, an entire lifetime measured against a mystery. I think they're getting closer, she whispered. The wind carried the words away. No answer came. The dead keep their own counsel. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered another fragment of Daniel Mercer's hidden existence. Bank records, sparse, incomplete, yet revealing. Cash withdrawals repeatedly occurred near isolated towns immediately before his temporary contracts ended. No electronic patterns. No ordinary consumer behavior. Mercer lived financially the same way he lived socially. Minimal traces. Maximum mobility. An old FBI consultant reviewing the data offered a simple observation. Some people spend their entire lives avoiding attachment. Others spend their lives avoiding accountability. Nobody responded, because nobody knew which category fit better, or whether both did. Late that afternoon, Sarah Donnelly made a discovery buried inside archived local newspapers. A classified advertisement. November 10th, 1990. For sale, used hunting equipment, tools, camping supplies. Cash only. Contact number registered to a farmhouse later rented by Daniel Mercer during his construction work. At first glance, meaningless, until another detail emerged. Emily Harper's father had answered that advertisement. He purchased an old radio component from the property 4 days before his daughter disappeared. The room fell completely silent. Not dramatic silence. The dangerous kind. The kind produced when coincidence begins resembling architecture. Did Mercer meet Emily's father? Possibly. Did he learn where the family lived? Possibly. Did a simple transaction place one life in direct proximity to another? Possibly. The word echoed through every discussion. Possibly. Investigations survive on that word. They also die because of it. Raymond Keller requested every surviving document connected to the sale. Receipts, witnesses, telephone logs, anything. Most no longer existed. Time consumes evidence with relentless efficiency. Still, one detail remained. Emily's father mentioned the meeting during a casual interview in 1990. A single sentence. He described the seller as quiet, polite, forgettable. Forgettable. Keller stared at the word for a long time. History, he realized, is often shaped by people nobody remembers meeting. Night descended early. Winter demanded it. Search crews withdrew. Laboratory teams continued working. The forest returned to stillness. Yet beneath that stillness, pressure continued building. The hunting blind yielded microscopic traces of fabric fibers. Initial comparisons suggested similarities to materials manufactured in the late 80s. Nothing unique. Nothing conclusive. The investigation lived inside those phrases now. Nothing unique, nothing conclusive, and still, somehow, impossible to ignore. Sarah remained at headquarters long after midnight, younger than most of her colleagues, too young to remember 1990. To her, the case existed entirely through documents and memories borrowed from others. Yet she felt its weight. Unsolved mysteries exert gravity across generations. She studied Mercer's timeline again. Job sites, travel routes, temporary addresses. Then she noticed something unexpected. A gap. 6 weeks unaccounted for during autumn 1990. No employment records. No financial activity. No confirmed location. Just absence. Human beings leave traces everywhere, unless they actively try not to. She brought the finding to Keller. He listened carefully. No immediate reaction. Just quiet thought. People disappear, he said finally. Sometimes they disappear from records before they disappear from lives. Outside, snow began falling once more. Millfield slept. The cemetery stood silent. The creek continued moving beneath ice. And somewhere inside the expanding shadow of Daniel Mercer's forgotten years, 6 missing weeks waited with the patience of a locked room no one had entered for decades. The investigation had spent 36 years asking what happened to Emily Harper. Now another question emerged from the darkness. What exactly had Daniel Mercer been doing before the town ever learned his name? Because the most frightening possibility of all was not that investigators had finally found their suspect. The most frightening possibility was that they had only discovered one chapter of a much larger story. The 6 missing weeks became the center of everything. Not evidence, not confession, not proof, an absence. And investigators understood better than most people that absences possess their own geometry. Human beings leave trails without realizing it. Gas receipts, employment forms, witnesses, bank activity, telephone records, tiny acts of existence scattered across ordinary life. Daniel Mercer vanished from all of them. 42 days, no verified location, no documented work, no financial transactions, nothing. The gap began in late September of 1990. It ended only days before Emily Harper disappeared. Raymond Keller stared at the timeline pinned across the command center wall. Red strings connected places. Blue markers indicated confirmed movements. The empty space between them seemed larger than entire states. People do not disappear accidentally. Not from records. Not from routine. Not from modern world. Unless disappearing itself serves a purpose. The possibility settled over the investigation like approaching weather. Nobody wanted to speak it aloud, because once spoken, ideas acquire momentum, and momentum is difficult to control. Sarah Donnelly continued digging through archive county material, searching for anything overlooked by previous generations. Old investigations produce mountains of paper. Somewhere inside those mountains, history occasionally hides its sharpest edges. She found a receipt. Small, water-damaged, nearly illegible, issued by a hardware store outside Harrisburg. October 1990. Cash purchase. Rope. Plastic sheeting. Camping lantern fuel. Ordinary items. Painfully ordinary. Yet the surveillance copy attached to the transaction carried a name. Daniel Mercer. The silence inside the office deepened. Nobody drew conclusions. Nobody needed to. The mind performs its own calculations. Back in Millfield, winter tightened its grip. Streetlights reflected against fresh snow. Store owners locked their doors earlier than usual. Conversations became quieter whenever strangers entered local diners. The town had spent decades living beside a mystery. Now, the mystery was changing shape. Changing shape frightened people. An unsolved tragedy occupies one corner of memory. A possible explanation forces memory to reorganize itself entirely. Emily Harper was no longer simply missing. She had become the center of a story reaching far beyond county lines. And that realization carried its own burden. Her mother noticed it immediately. The phone calls increased. Letters arrived from people she had never met. Families of missing daughters. Retired detectives. True crime enthusiasts convinced they possessed hidden answers. Grief attracts company. Not all company brings comfort. She stopped opening most envelopes. Instead, she sat near the window with old photographs spread across her lap. Emily at 12. Emily at 17. Emily standing beside her father repairing antique radios. Ordinary moments. Beautiful precisely because nobody realized they were temporary. Human beings never recognize the most important memories while living them. Recognition comes later. Recognition always arrives with pain. Meanwhile, investigators returned to the hunting blind discovered deeper inside the forest. Snow had preserved everything in silence. Forensic teams examined every board, every rusted nail, every surviving object. One detail immediately attracted attention. Carved into the interior wall. A date. October 1990. Beneath it, a single letter. M. No surname. No explanation. Just M. Teenagers carve initials into wood. Hunters mark territory. Lonely men leave traces proving they existed. The possibilities stretched endlessly. Still, the coincidence lingered. Mercer. Millfield. Murder. Human beings love patterns. Reality sometimes punishes that love. Laboratory analysis produced another surprise. Microscopic fibers recovered from the structure matched manufacturing styles consistent with work jackets sold widely during the late 1980s. Again, nothing unique. Again, another piece refusing to disappear. Raymond Keller remained cautious. 36 years had disciplined his instincts. Evidence deserved patience. Speculation deserved distance. Yet even he admitted something fundamental had changed. The investigation no longer searched for a ghost. It searched for a man. A dead man. A silent man. But a man nonetheless. Late one evening, Sarah received a call from Ohio. An elderly woman. Nervous voice. Long pauses. She claimed to have known Daniel Mercer decades earlier. Not well. Nobody knew him well, but enough to remember certain habits. Investigators listened carefully. Mercer loved maps, collected them obsessively, marked routes in private codes, avoided discussing family, avoided discussing childhood, avoided discussing almost everything. One statement, however, captured immediate attention. He always talked about places where nobody would ever look. Silence. The woman hesitated. I thought he meant fishing spots. No one answered, because everyone understood the terrible elasticity of language. Nobody would ever look. The phrase echoed through headquarters long after the call ended. The following morning, analysts re-examined Mercer's atlas. Fresh eyes, fresh questions. The symbols began revealing additional structure. Triangles near elevated terrain. Letters connected to landmarks. Numbers corresponding to distances. Not random. Systematic. A private navigation method built over years. One marking stood apart from all others. A black circle, larger than the rest, located near an abandoned quarry 15 miles east of Millfield. No accompanying notes. No date. Nothing. Just emphasis. Human beings circle things that matter. The search operation expanded once more. Heavy machinery remained impossible due to terrain conditions. Investigators proceeded on foot. The abandoned quarry looked like something forgotten by civilization itself. Jagged stone walls, frozen pools of dark water, rusting equipment consumed by decades of neglect. Silence dominated everything. Even birds avoided the place. Sarah felt it immediately. The strange pressure certain locations create. Not supernatural, not mystical, simply the accumulated weight of abandonment. Mercer, she thought, would have appreciated such isolation. The teams divided into grids. Careful, methodical. Hours passed. Nothing. Then one volunteer discovered an old campsite. Long abandoned. Fire pit. Broken lantern. Fragments of tarp buried beneath leaves. Ordinary signs of temporary habitation. Yet inside the fire pit rested something unexpected. Melted glass. Partially preserved. Forensic collection began immediately. Initial examination suggested old bottles. Possibly from the late 80s or early 90s. Maybe irrelevant. Maybe everything. The investigation existed permanently between those possibilities. As dusk approached, Keller stood overlooking the quarry. Wind moved through bare trees. The landscape offered no answers, only endurance. He remembered conversations from 1990. The confidence, the urgency, the certainty that hard work alone could solve any problem. Youth believes effort defeats mystery. Age understands mystery often survives effort entirely. Still, people continue searching because the alternative is surrender. And surrender carries its own form of guilt. Back in town, Emily's mother lit a candle near the family photographs. Simple ritual. No audience. No grand meaning. Just light against darkness. She had learned something during 36 years of uncertainty. Human beings require small acts of defiance. A candle. A memory. A name spoken aloud. The world forgets quickly. Love refuses. Night settled over Pennsylvania. The quarry disappeared into shadow. The forest proclaimed its silence. And somewhere inside the 6 missing weeks of Daniel Mercer's life, hidden behind forgotten roads and coded maps and places where nobody would ever look, the past continued waiting with extraordinary patience. Because some secrets are buried. Others are simply left alone long enough that everyone mistakes abandonment for disappearance. The investigation, for the first time in decades, was beginning to understand the difference. The quarry did not belong to maps anymore. Official records acknowledged its existence, but only in the language reserved for things society has abandoned. Closed, unsafe, restricted access, no commercial value, no future development planned. A place erased while still physically standing. Raymond Keller understood places like that. They attracted people who wished to disappear without technically leaving the world. Daniel Mercer had circled the quarry in black ink. Nothing else in his atlas received the same treatment. No explanation, no notes, no symbols, just a dark ring pressed firmly into paper decades earlier by a hand now buried beneath Ohio soil. Human beings emphasize what matters. Investigators returned at dawn. The temperature hovered below freezing. Thin fog drifted above stagnant pools of water collected inside the excavation pits. Rusted machinery leaned at impossible angles, resembling enormous skeletons abandoned by another century. Silence ruled everything. Even experienced officers lowered their voices. Some landscapes demand respect. Others demand caution. The quarry demanded both. Sarah Donnelly led one of the search teams along the eastern ridge. Ground conditions remained unstable. Every step required attention. Loose stone shifted beneath heavy boots. Ancient warning signs, their paint almost completely gone, stood like forgotten monuments to human negligence. Halfway through the survey area, she stopped. Something caught the light. Metal. Small. Partially buried. The object emerged after several careful minutes. A pocket compass. Old. Weathered. Its glass face cracked. The needle permanently frozen. Ordinary. Until investigators examined the back. One letter had been engraved into the metal. M. Again. Always M. Nobody spoke. No conclusions. No dramatic declarations. Experience had trained them against premature certainty. Still, patterns accumulate whether human beings welcome them or not. The compass entered evidence storage. The quarry kept its silence. Meanwhile, analysts continued reconstructing Mercer's missing 6 weeks. The hardware store receipt remained the only confirmed activity. Rope, plastic sheeting, fuel, camping supplies, purchased with cash. No witnesses remembered him. No surveillance futi survive. Modern investigations rely on digital memory. 1990 offered only fragments. And fragments require imagination. Dangerous imagination. The difference between investigation and fiction, Keller often reminded younger detectives, is discipline. Facts first. Questions second. Conclusions last. Never reverse the order. By noon, another discovery changed everything. An old maintenance tunnel ran beneath part of the quarry. Officially sealed in 1982. Unofficially forgotten. The entrance remained hidden behind overgrown vegetation and collapsed fencing. Nobody noticed it during initial surveys. Sarah found it by accident. Or perhaps history simply decided the time for hiding had ended. The metal gate hung partially open. Rust consumed the hinges. Cold air flowed outward from darkness untouched by sunlight for decades. Search protocols activated immediately. No one entered without proper equipment. No one rushed. Television dramas reward impulsiveness. Reality punishes it. Hours later, a specialized team moved inside. Flashlights cut narrow paths through ancient dust. The tunnel extended farther than expected. Mining equipment remained scattered throughout the passageways. Tools abandoned mid-task. Broken lamps. Old tracks disappearing into shadow. Human industry frozen in time. Then they found evidence of newer activity. Not recent, but newer. A fire ring. Empty food cans. Fragments of tarp. Someone had occupied the space long after mining operations ended. Laboratory estimates would eventually place the campsite somewhere between the late 1980s and early 1990s. The exact period investigators feared. The exact period Daniel Mercer disappeared from documented existence. The atmosphere above ground transformed immediately. Nobody said his name. Nobody needed to. Keller arrived shortly after receiving the report. He stood outside the tunnel entrance for several moments before entering. The cold inside felt different. Older. Still. Like air that remembered secrets. The campsite itself looked unremarkable. Temporary. Functional. Yet certain details disturbed him. Everything had been arranged with precision. Cooking supplies aligned neatly. Sleeping materials positioned away from direct drafts. Escape routes remained visible from every angle. The habits of a careful traveler, or a careful predator. Forensic teams documented everything. Then Sarah noticed something beneath layers of dust near the rear wall. Paper. Folded. Protected inside deteriorating plastic. The discovery halted all movement. Evidence technicians approached slowly. The object emerged intact enough for immediate identification. A road map. Pennsylvania. Same manufacturer. Same edition. As the atlas recovered from Mercer's storage locker, the room fell silent. Even breathing seemed inappropriate. Coincidences existed, but coincidences possess limits. One page had been folded repeatedly. Millfield occupied the center, and beside the town name, written in fading blue ink, appeared 3 words. No witnesses around. Nothing more. No explanation. No date. Just observation. Cold. Clinical. Terrifying in its simplicity. Outside, winter sunlight faded behind heavy clouds. The news remained confidential. For now, investigators understood the consequences of public disclosure. Communities already burdened by grief do not need speculation presented as certainty. Yet privately, everything had changed. The case no longer revolved around possibility. It revolved around proximity. Daniel Mercer had been near Millfield. Daniel Mercer had preserved Emily Harper's disappearance in personal collections. Daniel Mercer's DNA connected him to evidence inside her home. And now, hidden inside an abandoned tunnel, investigators discovered materials linking him to the exact region during the exact time in question. Still no confession. Still no body. Still no complete truth. But the darkness between facts grew narrower. Emily's mother sensed it before anyone told her. People spoke differently, moved differently. Hope carries a distinct energy. So does fear. After 36 years, she recognized both. That evening, she opened a small wooden box containing letters Emily wrote during college. Dozens of them. Ordinary observations. Exams. Friends. Books. Dreams. One sentence stopped her. I think people are mostly what they choose to hide. She read it twice. Then a third time. Outside, snow drifted against the windows. The world remained quiet. The sentence lingered. People are mostly what they choose to hide. Daniel Mercer had hidden 6 weeks. Hidden maps. Hidden newspaper clippings. Hidden movements across multiple states. Perhaps Emily, without ever meeting him, had described him perfectly. At headquarters, Raymond Keller remained awake long past midnight. The road map from the tunnel rested inside a secure evidence container. He studied photographs instead of the original. Professional habit. Professional caution. The words refused to leave his mind. No witnesses around. Such a strange thing to write. Not directions. Not reminders. An assessment. A calculation. The language of someone evaluating opportunity. Keller hated speculation. Tonight, speculation arrived uninvited. Had Mercer been scouting? Waiting? Learning routines? The possibility chilled him more than any winter air. Because random violence is horrifying. Deliberate patience is something else entirely. The tunnel offered shelter. Isolation. Privacy. A man could remain there for weeks without attracting attention. A man could disappear from records. From memory. From ordinary life. 42 missing days suddenly felt less mysterious. And far more frightening. Outside, Millfield slept beneath another layer of snow. Children dreamed. Streetlights hummed. Families gathered around routines preserved through generations. Normal life continued with extraordinary determination. It always does. Yet beneath abandoned stone and forgotten earth, history had opened a door nobody expected to find. And behind that door waited a possibility more unsettling than any answer investigators had imagined. What if Daniel Mercer had not merely passed through Millfield? What if he had been watching it long before the town ever learned his name? The tunnel changed the investigation. Not because it answered anything, because it proved intention. For 36 years, Daniel Mercer had existed in the case as a possibility supported by science, geography, and coincidence layered upon coincidence. DNA placed him near Emily Harper. Records placed him near Millfield. Personal collections connected him to her disappearance. But the tunnel offered something more disturbing. Presence. Deliberate presence. Someone had lived there. Someone had studied the region. Someone had written, in careful blue ink, 3 words that now haunted every investigator involved. No witnesses around. Raymond Keller hated those words. They carried the tone of observation rather than memory. The language of evaluation. The language of a man measuring risk. He had seen similar phrasing years earlier in criminal investigations involving burglars, poachers, drifters who survived by understanding human routines better than the humans themselves. Watch. Wait. Move when nobody is looking. The oldest strategy in the world. The most terrifying precisely because it works. The tunnel remained sealed after the discovery. Additional forensic teams arrived from Harrisburg. Every square foot received scrutiny. Dust samples, fiber collections, microscopic traces preserved by darkness and time. The work proceeded with almost religious patience. History punishes carelessness. Meanwhile, Sarah Donnelly kept returning to the 6 missing weeks. 42 days. Long enough to disappear. Long enough to plan. Long enough to become familiar with a town without anyone remembering your face. Millfield in 1990 had been trusting. People noticed strangers, certainly. But temporary workers moved through rural Pennsylvania constantly. Construction crews, seasonal laborers, hunters, delivery drivers. A quiet man buying coffee twice a week attracted little attention. An ordinary truck parked near a gas station became invisible after the 3rd encounter. Human beings normalize patterns with astonishing speed. Predators understand this instinctively. Late one afternoon, Sarah uncovered another fragment. Telephone records. Incomplete. Faded. Retrieved from archived billing systems, preserved only because a telecommunications company had never bothered destroying them. One call stood out. October 18, 1990. A payphone outside Millfield. Duration, 3 minutes. Recipient number linked to the temporary rental property Mercer occupied during his construction contracts. The timing mattered, because Mercer officially had not yet begun working. Because Mercer officially should not have been there. Yet somebody called his residence from within the town itself. Maybe him. Maybe someone else. Maybe nothing. The investigation lived permanently inside that uncertainty. Still, another thread attached itself to the growing web. And webs, once large enough, reveal shapes impossible to ignore. Back at the quarry, specialists pushed deeper into the maintenance tunnels. New sections emerged from behind collapse supports. Narrow passages, storage chambers, forgotten equipment rooms untouched for decades. The air carried a strange stillness. Not empty, waiting. In one chamber, investigators discovered evidence of long-term habitation. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Reality rarely provides dramatic moments. Just practical objects, water containers, old batteries, camping supplies, a portable radio, and books. 3 paperback novels stacked carefully against a stone wall. Weathered, damaged, readable. One title immediately caught Sarah's attention. A story about a man living under a false identity in a small American town. Coincidence, perhaps. Human beings read all kinds of things. Yet coincidence had become increasingly expensive. Every new example demanded payment in doubt. The portable radio proved even more interesting. Manufacturing date, 1988. Common model, mass-produced, but someone had etched a small symbol onto the battery compartment. A triangle, the same triangle appearing throughout Mercer's maps. Silence followed the discovery. No announcement, no celebration, only the slow, uncomfortable realization that private codes had crossed multiple pieces of evidence. Patterns again, always patterns. The tunnel was no longer merely a shelter. It belonged to someone systematic, someone organized, someone who marked the world according to rules nobody else understood. That evening, Millfield gathered for a candlelight vigil. No media invitations, no speeches from politicians, just residents carrying memories through cold winter air. Emily Harper's photograph rested beside dozens of candles flickering against the darkness. Children who never knew her stood beside grandparents who had joined search parties in 1990. Time collapsed. Generations merged. Shared grief ignored chronology. Emily's mother attended quietly. No words, no interviews. She held a single candle and watched the flame move in the wind. 36 years. 36 winters. 36 Christmases with one chair permanently empty. People spoke often about closure. She disliked the word. Doors close. Books close. Lives rarely do. Loss simply changes shape. Raymond Keller arrived late. Stood near the back. Hands in coat pockets. Watching. Listening. The community had aged. So had he. Yet the feeling remained identical. The same stubborn refusal to forget. The same insistence that unanswered questions deserve pursuit. Long after logic recommended surrender. Across town, reporters continued speculating. National audiences consumed updates with fascination. Cold case. DNA breakthrough. Hidden tunnel. The language of mystery. The language of entertainment. Keller despised it. Because real investigations move slowly. Real grief moves slower. The next morning delivered another shock. Forensic analysis of dust layers inside the tunnel produced an approximate occupancy window. Late September through early November 1990. 42 days. Exactly. The room fell completely silent. No movement. No conversation. Even experienced investigators struggled to process the implication. The missing weeks. Not missing. Hidden. Someone lived inside that abandoned quarry during the precise period Daniel Mercer vanished from documented life. Science could not identify the occupant. Not yet. But time itself had aligned. Perfectly. Sarah sat alone with the report for several minutes. The numbers seemed unreal. 42 days. An entire chapter erased from official history. An entire chapter preserved beneath stone. Questions emerged faster than answers. Why remain underground? Why choose isolation so extreme? What was he waiting for? And most importantly, was Emily Harper the objective from the beginning? Or merely a terrible opportunity recognized by someone already hiding nearby? Human beings crave motive because motive offers boundaries. Without boundaries, fear expands infinitely. Back in the tunnel, investigators reached the deepest accessible chamber. The ceiling sagged dangerously. Water dripped rhythmically from ancient stone. Their flashlights revealed something unexpected. Writing. Faint. Nearly invisible. Names? Numbers? Coordinates? Nobody knew. Time had consumed most of it. Yet one line remained partially legible. That quiet town. Nothing else. 2 words. Broken context. Infinite implications. The phrase traveled through headquarters within hours. Quiet town. Millfield had always described itself that way. Newspapers described it that way. Residents describe it that way. Had the writer referred to Millfield? Possibly. Again that word. Possibly. Raymond Keller stared at photographs of the faded writing long into the night. His instincts, disciplined by decades, urged caution. But another feeling had begun growing. Not certainty. Something stranger. Recognition. The sense that the investigation was no longer uncovering random artifacts. It was entering someone else's narrative. Someone else's carefully constructed world. Daniel Mercer, if he truly occupied that tunnel, had spent weeks observing a community from the shadows, learning roads, learning habits, learning silence. The realization unsettled him more than any evidence discovered so far. Because monsters imagined by society are loud, obvious, explosive. The most dangerous ones understand patience. They understand routine. They understand exactly how invisible an ordinary face can become. Outside, snow continued falling across Pennsylvania. The quarry disappeared beneath white layers. The tunnel returned to darkness. But darkness, once disturbed, never fully recovers. Something had awakened. Not in the forest, not in the stone. Inside the investigation itself. The 6 missing weeks no longer represented absence. They represented preparation. And if preparation existed, then somewhere ahead waited a purpose no one was fully prepared to confront.